All right, it's exactly 2 o'clock. I see people are still logging in, but we'll go ahead and get started on things. So first of all, I just want to say welcome. My name is Reed Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Technology Consulting with Canopy Partners. I'm joined today by Stephen Willis, who's our VP of Advanced Technology Solutions, which is a fancy way of saying he's our Chief Technology Officer. And we obviously are coming to you from our home broadcast booth today, so I appreciate everybody joining us, and I imagine most of you are doing the same. It's a pretty interesting time in our nation right now, as well as in our industry. A lot of things are changing, and first of all, I just hope everyone that's on the call is safe and well, and that your families and your colleagues are also. And I think we're doing the right thing by staying at home, and hopefully this will pay off. But again, thanks for joining us, and just wanted to welcome you. We have been seeing and receiving a lot of feedback from the industry that volumes are significantly down across the country, on a magnitude of 40 to 50% with just about every client that we speak with. And it's causing people to really rethink how we're doing radiology in a time like this, and the need to be able to do teleradiology and work and read remotely have become even more important over the past few weeks. And so we felt like, being technology advisors in the industry, that it would be appropriate for us to host a session on how to effectively implement a remote reading environment for your practice. We realize that a lot of groups may already have this in place and may just be looking for ways to fine tune or optimize it. And there are many groups that have thought about putting remote reading in place, but just haven't made that investment yet, and now they're having to scramble. So I'm not sure, there's a wide spectrum of people on the call, don't know exactly where everybody's coming from on that spectrum, but we're going to try to address a number of different potential approaches to remote reading. And we'll start with sort of the simplest and easiest approaches, and kind of work our way out toward the more complete but more complex approaches. And so this is about a 20-minute webinar. We want it to be very intentionally very informal, very interactive, but just so we don't have a lot of background sound confusion, we're going to keep attendees muted for about 20 minutes or so. The core content of the session is about 20 minutes. If you have questions during this time, please use the chat feature or the question feature in the panel on the GoToMeeting, and just submit your question, and we've got a team that is fielding those questions, and we'll try to address them as we go. At the end, once we've completed the discussion, then we'll open up everyone's mics and just take some live Q&A, and we'll go as long as people have questions. So in total, I don't expect we'd be any longer than 30 minutes. We want to be really respectful of everyone's time. So again, I'm Reed Humphrey. This is Stephen Willis. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. And Stephen, working with 150 or so radiology clients across the country, you've kind of seen and been in the doors of a lot of different environments. What can you tell us about what you're seeing out there in the market, and where remote reading seems to be coming into play right now?
Yeah, so quick check, you can hear me well, right?
Yes.
Great. First time using my home studio for this type of thing. So
nice telescope in the background.
It's a good. Yeah. We'll send over images to attendees of the moon tonight, since we finally have a clear night to use it. So it's pretty fantastic. Anyhow, we're seeing a few interesting things in radiology, like you mentioned before, Reed. We have a big volume dip happening. Elective procedures are being canceled, in order to preserve PPE and slow down transmission of COVID-19. And we're also, of course, seeing patients being just much more cautious about going to the EDs. A lot of patients who used to go to the ED for primary care are all of a sudden finding alternate routes for that. And then, of course, because of all of this, radiology is seeing quite the dip right now, like you were saying, 40 to 50%. And you would think that would mean those of us in radiology IT are on cruise control right now. Okay, well, no big deal. We'll just hang out at the office or at home and solve half the problems we used to solve, right? But that's just not the case, because at the end of the day, radiology groups are seeing that their biggest challenge right now is that they are having to react in a couple of interesting ways to what's going on. One way is that they want to participate in social distancing and want to participate, in being as flexible as possible. And at the same time, a lot of imaging centers are closed or dramatically reduced hours right now. And so the way they schedule is dramatically different, or the way they want to schedule, I should say, is dramatically different than what it was just a few weeks ago. In two main ways. One way is that, of course, they're not always wanting to work in the exact same space they were working in before. And then two, they want to work more distant from each other than a lot of them have before. A lot of reading rooms for our own local groups here and clients we have around the country are highly compressed, just small cubes or even small working spaces in a big room where 3 or 4 people might be congregated, or maybe even as many as 10 people are congregated day in, day out. And they want to react to those two needs. One, I need to be more flexible in my schedule, and two, we need to find safer spaces to work in than maybe the large hospital reading rooms that are in place today. So, we're seeing radiology departments have to react to those things, and they're taking two main approaches that we're seeing and helping them through right now. The first approach is establishing a reading office space, sort of like multiple bunkers in a single geographic location that they can read from. And one of the things that we have going for us in the industry right now is that there is an absolute ton of hospital and hospital congruent, if you will, office spaces that are just sitting empty, because most places have said, unless you're an actual essential employee to the day-to-day delivery of care, we don't want you in here. And so they've sent all those folks to work from home. Our main hospital system here in Greensboro, unless you're an actual clinical provider, you're not even allowed to come to work right now. So there are dozens and dozens of offices just sitting empty all day long with no chance that an employee is going to need that. So we're seeing a lot of radiology groups establish new reading rooms that are geographically separate from one another. And so and the why there, is they wanted to have infection control. They want to have safety with each other, but they still want to be in a space where they're clinically relevant, right? They all maybe don't want to be at home or somewhere else. And another nice thing that we're seeing radiology groups do is say, okay, well, this is our space for positive patients radiologists who are either exposed or on quarantine or have tested positive, and maybe this is the area we want those folks in. Then over here, this is the area we want radiologists in who are negative. And so, with a bunch of different office spaces available, there's a lot of options there. The other thing that's really nice about that type of scenario is it can be done fast. And so if there's already space that is either inside or near the hospital, and the hospital already has granted network access to that space and security's all sewn up and everything, all you're really talking about doing is kind of what we call a lift and shift. You're talking about just taking a read station out of a reading room, moving it somewhere else, plugging it back in, making sure the networking is all configured, and off you go. The radiologist kind of has a different space they work in now that fits those goals. So, the pro there is that it's quick, it's effective, it works, it sort of checks a lot of the boxes radiologists need, and it doesn't cost, hardly anything. The con is that it still requires rads to, even if they're positive or not feeling well, to get up and go to work, right? One of the nice things we have going for us right now in a lot of regions is radiologist capacity, but we know that won't be forever. And we're pretty confident the need to social distance is going to last long beyond our need to, keep to furlough or keep radiologists at home, because the volumes are going to come back. Things like screening mammograms and elective surgeries eventually have to happen. And so those volumes are going to come back far before we need to all just go back into the same, compressed reading spaces. So that's really nice. The other thing we're seeing RADs do is start to try to work from home. And this is something a lot of RAD groups have wrestled with over the years. Some RAD group cultures support that, some don't. But now it seems to be an easy answer to a lot of problems. If you've got a rad who's truly, needed to be quarantined for 14 days, then home is really the best place for them to read, especially if they feel well enough to read. So what that looks like is either purchasing brand new and deploying or moving read stations you have at other locations into rad's home, where the schedule allows that. That's really nice in that it's so flexible. And like I was saying earlier, sick rads can potentially work even though they're positive. And like I was saying earlier, that's just another type of lift and shift. Instead of lifting and shifting into an office space that's unoccupied right now, instead you're lifting and shifting into radiologist homes. The pro to that, obviously, is that it's fantastic for radiologists. They if they are able to work and are comfortable working from home and have a space to place a read station, which we find most do, it's really easy on scheduling, right? So you just say, well, just do work you would normally do, work your same specialty, work your same shift, but do it from your house and, in your pajamas or whatnot. The cons to that are that it often involves buying a bunch of read stations, and everyone knows read stations aren't very inexpensive. They can run from $7,000 to $70,000 depending on what we're talking about. Security can also be a bit more difficult in that arrangement because it's not as easy as just saying go home and plug your read station into whatever your wireless access point is. Most read stations can't talk wireless. Most radiologists and others either have some sort of data room in their home, or they have like me, like right over here behind my TV, that's where my cable modem exists, right? So if I wanted to plug into it with an old school read station, I'd have to figure that out, right? So that's the thing you got to figure out. And then lastly, security isn't quite as easy. We're often quite shy in IT about any work PC just being plugged into someone's home network without appropriate hardware and firewalling between whatever's happening on the home network and that read station. So those are the two main approaches we're seeing in terms of physically what to do. And I think there's a lot of maybe reasons why these are good ideas, and one or the other, or maybe both, are ones that your rad group might want to employ. We're doing it with a lot of different groups around the country, helping them facilitate that, both from a operational procurement of the hardware needed, and of course a security and policy standpoint. And so we can definitely help a lot there. But yeah, like we were kind of saying earlier when we were chatting earlier, Reed, there's some groups this is easy for, and some that maybe they just can't do one of these two approaches, so they have to think different.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, the first approach is finding additional space inside of your hospitals for which the radiologist can kind of divide and conquer and get organized and work within facilities that you read for. The second one is reading from home. That seems like a pretty big leap. If you haven't ever read from home before, what's the conversation that you have to have with your hospital to say, hey, we really need to be able to read from home? And how are you going to get them comfortable with this is going to be secure and we're not going to expose any, no HIPAA violations, expose PHI.
Right.
We're going to meet the hospital's security standards when working from home. And who would be paying for the read stations? Would you ask the hospital to pay for the read stations, or should the rad group be expected to do it because it's really being more of a convenience and benefit for the radiologist?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to consider there. From the security standpoint, luckily that cat has been skinned a lot of times by hospitals. Like as an example, if they sent all their employees home, I'm sure they didn't just furlough their entire ITS staff or whatever, right? And so they're going to normally have a way that they approve whatever connectivity needs to look like, assuming the hospital owns the PACS and all that kind of stuff. Now, if your rad group owns the PACS or whatnot, maybe you've got a whole different set of options available to you. One of the things that we like best, in our environment, with our 1,700 radiologists or more across the country that we work with, is that we recommend that, like I was saying earlier, that the hospital network essentially be extended into the home, and we build an island for that radiologist to work from home. Now, that doesn't mean going and buying some sort of circuit from AT&T in order to make that happen. We would just normally recommend purchasing a piece of hardware, and a lot of different vendors from the common, like Cisco and Meraki and others. They make this great hardware where You can configure it at the IT level at the hospital or at whoever the provider of the clinical systems is. And you bring that hardware home, you bring your read station home, you plug your read station into the hardware, you plug the hardware into your internet outlet, whatever you have as far as the internet switch at home, and that's it. There's no configuration anymore. But what that's effectively doing is it's taking anything that exists on that read station, wrapping it up inside of an encrypted tunnel and sending it directly into the hospital's network. So what you don't have to worry about is anything in the home being able to see the read station, or when you're traversing the internet with your clinical applications and PHI being exposed, to the common internet that exists out there. So that's one of the strategies we see. We see software-based VPNs. We see sometimes people installing firewalls, smaller, less expensive firewalls in physicians' homes or other remote leading locations. But there's almost always, if the hospital owns the platform, it's always possible in that way. In terms of payment, I think that all depends on the relationship and the short versus long term. If we're really just talking about a short-term safety mechanism for which the hospital wants to actively participate, then maybe, you've got a lot more ground to stand on asking the hospital to help fund these initiatives. If you're talking about, well, we've always wanted to read from home, so let's finally start to make that cultural shift and use this, opportunity to get read stations into homes so we can be more flexible once volumes comes back. Maybe it's a little more on the radiologist, but this is one of those things that we always think of as partnering conversations, right? So how can you better serve your partners by implementing new types of technology? And the better case you can make for increased service, the more you can normally talk hospitals into helping you fund initiatives if they can see what they're getting out of it.
Okay, so we said we were going to kind of wade out from the shallow waters into more deeper waters in terms of where we're taking this conversation. So we kind of hit the shallow waters, which is make additional space within the facilities that you read for, and or set up the ability to read remotely or from home. There's another level to this, which is how do you work from home or outside of the hospital most effectively in a way that you can share the work list, workload balance, assign reads to the right rads based on subspecialty, things like that. It's one thing to be able to read from home. It's another one to be able to function as a practice and share and scale your work so that one person's not getting buried and the other person's over here reading the Wall Street Journal. So how do you balance all that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because while we love the idea, we'll just go grab the read stations that aren't being used, in imaging centers and other reading rooms and drag them into radiologist homes or into new spaces. Often that's technically possible, but in reality doesn't actually work for radiology groups to get the work done. And the root of all of that is that often radiology groups aren't reading out of a single system for a single hospital, right? So a lot of the radiology groups we've helped through the years, their main sort of scheduling and workflow headache day in, day out is that they're having to read out of 3 or 4 or 5 or even 9 or 12 different clinical platforms. And so in this instance, those first 2 solutions, while simple and quick and easy, they don't actually work for rad groups that have that challenge, because are you going to completely give up specialty work, and are you going to completely give up all the norms that exist for how you serve your clients to date on one hand, or on the other hand, are you going to completely move as many as 4 or 5 or 6 different read stations into a single radiologist home? And how are you going to do that times however many radiologists you have, so that you can continue offering subspecialty work and good turnaround times and all that? And the simple answer is you just can't, right? We haven't seen any radiology groups who are willing to fund 5 read stations per radiologist at home. That would just get prohibitively expensive. So what we do is we have a couple other options that I think you were kind of leaning towards here. The kind of the quicker, somewhat simpler, and less weighty solution, if you will, is the universal work list solution. And this is something we've helped multiple clients out with through the years. And what we're talking about there is licensing a universal work list that you have installed on a read station that drives multiple different PACS voice recognitions, EMRs, advanced visualization tools, all on a single piece of hardware, single read station, single set of monitors, single mouse, single keyboard, single dictation or mic or mics. And what that does is that fixes the problem of needing to purchase and deploy these multiple read stations, while additionally bringing all your work into a single work list that all can see in the same fashion. So rather than the pivot model where it's read station A for a minute, then read station B for a minute, then read station C for a minute, instead all that work is consolidated on a single work list. On the desktop, that single work list is integrated with all the different PACs and VRs and EMRs that you have configured in your different hospitals you work with, and that work list drives. So open study A, and then over here we get that PACs, and then B, and then here we get this PACs, and C and that PACs, and it toggles them back and forth as the day goes on, so that theoretically you can put all your work on a single work list and manage it effectively. You can always get the right study to the right rad at the right time. And again, you're working off a single read station. And again, having that single read station you work from often allows you to be much more flexible as to where you physically put radiologists and how they do their work. There's some pros and cons to that type of technology. The pros we kind of just went through. We always go through the pros in the presentation piece, and that's that all the work is together. There's a single read station. Scheduling can be as subspecialized as you want. It's very easy to distribute work back and forth to different radiologists based on sort of who the best radiologist is to read that study at a specific time, or what that specific SLA is with that environment or that study type or whatnot. It's really nice to have all that work consolidated into a single space. But there's cons to that too. It's not nearly as simple as just plugging things in, right? You can't just install 5 or 6 different PACs and 3 VRs and 6 EMRs and 4 advanced visualization or even 30 different advanced visualization practices products on a single read station and flip it on and go, right? It's quite artful how we have to get that done, and it's just not always the smoothest way to work day in, day out. Technically, it can be made to work, and we know a lot of rad groups and some fantastic, super high quality rad groups who are working in that environment, but it does require quite a bit of hand-holding and maintenance to make that environment as fluid as possible for radiologists, for sure.
Okay, so you said there's some pros and cons of using the unified work list, but it is certainly a step up above just having multiple reading stations. So that makes sense. Taking it to the next level, talk to me about like a unified reading platform where everything is one consistent system. How does that work, and how does somebody get from point A to point B to more of that kind of nirvana type of a solution?
Yeah. It's certainly a lot of work, but it really is for radiology groups who we've seen invest in this type of technology over the past 10 years and unify all their work into a single platform, work list, voice recognition, PACs, even different advanced realization packages and others that they've all unified into one platform on a single read station that they control, quite frankly. They've got an enormous leg up today. So, just giving you a couple of working case examples. We've helped a group that has taken 11 read stations and put them in a vacated office space right across the street from the hospital, while additionally deploying 22 read stations into fresh radiologist homes that they've procured, deployed, and brought live 22 read stations in under a month. And that's quite frankly just not something that's possible unless you have a unified platform in place to do anything nearly that quickly. But radiology groups who can do that kind of thing really can be as flexible as they want with scheduling and work distribution, while not having to give up any of the quality of what they're doing in their group. So, in terms of what that is, we're talking about bringing all the HL7 and the DICOM data from your sending facilities into your own platform, which you own and control, or maybe partner with your hospitals on jointly owning and controlling. And you bring all that into a single platform. You do all the work out of that single platform. and then you, of course, send back results from that platform to the native EMRs or whatnot in the hospitals. And additionally, you can send back annotations and markups and whatnot into different hospital archives in the event that your platform is not the archive. Additionally, you can, from that single platform, launch all kinds of different advanced visualization packages and others. And the other really nice thing about this type of thing is that you have already sort of stepped through the different security and financial and sort of procedural gates that make it so when it comes time to make a big change like this, like, oh, let's send all radiologists home for 3 months. You just get to make the choice in how you do that. You don't have to keep going back and forth to your different partners and trying to figure this stuff out while they are probably right now in full-on crisis mode, right? And so while radiology is in this dip in volume and urgency right now, radiology groups who have a platform like this can lean on their IT and say, okay, get this work done for us while they've got a little time because we know a storm's coming, right? And so, you know, that increased flexibility while not having to give up any efficiency or quality for radiology groups, even build additional efficiency and quality in by having a single platform versus working out of multiple different platforms, really gives those groups, as we've said before, it gives those groups kind of control over their destiny in an environment like this, instead of feeling like they're just having to send rads out to sit on islands where there's almost no work to do, or having to give up on some of their normal quality initiatives in order to get through a tough time like this.
Okay, so the big difference in using the unified work list, just the unified work list, is that's laying over multiple packs, multiple VRs, multiple EMRs, and it's kind of like a traffic cop, kind of toggling between those things, and it's firing up one system and shutting down the other one, and you're still reading out of, it's a very different user experience reading out of different packs and dictating out of different VRs. And so while you can do it from one station, the switching of all the applications going on is a lot more complex. And maybe the ability then to assign work or share work can also be a little bit more cumbersome. But in the unified reading environment, what we're talking about is not only a unified work list, but one PACS, one VR, one interface engine. Everything is one system. And so every radiologist, no matter where they sit down, can have the exact same reading experience with no degradation, and can easily share and distribute work as needed so that nobody's left out on an island somewhere. Is that a good way of
exactly right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, I think that the main sort of difference in those two solutions is that one, you know, if I would describe it in the simplest layman's terms, I would say, well, with a unified work list solution, we can get all your work onto a single workstation. What I can't do is guarantee you a greater amount of efficiency or quality or anything like that. I can just literally get it onto a single read station. Like technically it all can be there. And you can have a single work list, which is a really big upgrade from what a lot of radiology groups have, having to manage, you know, multiple work lists. But with a full unified radiology platform, I can get it onto a single read station and dramatically increase your efficiency and quality at the exact same time.
Okay, makes sense. So just keeping a check on time, we're coming up on the 30-minute mark, and we promise to be very respectful of people's time. So this has been a really good overview. For those of you that are attending, we're going to unmute the mics now and just open it up and take questions. You can also use the chat box if you want to type in a question, and we'll take a few questions as long as people have them. Also, we're going to have a follow-up session to this that we're going to be hosting in 2 weeks. That'll be a deeper dive on these topics, and we'll get more into the weeds of how to actually do these things and what are some of the systems that we recommend. What might you be looking at from a financial standpoint, and then how do you get a return on investment from doing these things? Is there an opportunity to go back and potentially provide services and monetize back with your hospital partners, things like that? So yeah, we'll kind of advance this discussion in the next webinar, but we just wanted to kind of give the broad overview today, and hopefully you all have found this to be informative. So now if our administrators can unmute the mics, we'll just open it up and see if anybody has any questions.
You know, Reid, while we wait for all that to happen, one thing I might mention here is that that full unified radiology platform historically has been quite the investment in not just money, but time. You know, we've been looking at maybe taking as much as 6 to 12 to 18 months to fully deploy it across all the facilities of environment, you know, radiology group might read for. But one of the things I'm excited about talking about in our next webinar is how we can dramatically reduce that window with some of the new partnerships we have out in the industry, so that, you know, instead of it being 6 to 8 to 18 months, we could be talking about weeks to get a radiology group up on a platform like this.
Okay, I'd like to learn about that. I don't think I was aware of that we could compress it that fast, but that's interesting. Okay, so I think we have everybody unmuted. Is there anyone that has any questions? Feel free to ask anything you want. Can you speak up a little louder, please?
I think it might just be background noise.
Oh, okay. Anyone else with questions? Or let me check the panel and just see if anybody submitted any online. No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. If there are no questions, then I think we'll wrap it up. Really appreciate everybody's attendance and participation. We will send an email, just a follow-up email with a link to this recording. If you feel inclined to watch it again, or if you'd like to share it with anybody, feel free to do that. And we'll also send everybody who was on this session an invitation to our next webinar that'll be coming up in 2 weeks, and hopefully you can join us there. So thanks again, everyone. We appreciate it. Again, hope you're all safe and well, and we hope to be speaking with you sometime soon. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks a lot.